Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations, second chances, fresh starts, and powerful new chapters. I'm thrilled to be talking to Lee Chambers today. Lee is the founder and CEO of a brilliant organisation called Male Allies UK, which is focused on supporting organisations to engage men in inclusion and promote effective allyship, working with boys, men in the workplace, fathers, and of course women too. Lee is a serial reinventor, as you'll hear. Work-wise, he started in corporate finance, then built and exited a tech company. He spent a couple of years at home looking after his young children before being spurred on by that experience to start Male Allies UK. Lee has a really long list of awards and citations. He's been on the Startups 100 Index, has received a Great British Entrepreneur Award. He sits on the board of CMI Women, Regenerate UK, and the Manchester Metropolitan University Business School. In 2024, he even received the Freedom of the City of London for services to equality in business. Lee is the first Black British scientist to be awarded a Kavli Fellow of the National Academy of Sciences in the USA, and this was for his work on health inequalities. He's the 2023 UN Women Changemaker of the Year and is an ambassador for the UK government's Lilac Review for Disabled Entrepreneurship. Oh, and not to leave out that he's written a best-selling book called Momentum, 13 Ways to Unlock Your Potential. Hello, Lee. Lee Chambers, thank you so much for joining me on the Phoenix Conversations. I have said to you that this is all about reinvention, and you are someone who really has had some very clear phases in your life, I think, where things have really changed. So, but I'd like to really start at the beginning. I'd like to find out where the young Lee grew up and any influences you think came from your childhood.
Yeah, no, it's an absolute pleasure to be with you today, Lucy. And yeah, reinvention is sometimes I think I've lived for longer than I actually have. 40 years ago, my life started on a council estate in Bolton, in the northwest of England. I was a bit of a surprise. My parents were teenagers, and I wasn't expected to be brought into this world when I was. I had quite an interesting childhood, so navigating the world as a young black boy in a very, very white town. There was me being, and not realizing at the time, but feeling quite different in how I navigated the world, how I saw things. I had a very, very, very big driver for social justice as a child. Didn't like it when people got bullied. Didn't like it when people weren't treated fairly. I was that child who ended up getting in trouble quite often. But that was usually because so, someone had stolen a toy off a child and I went and took it back off them to give it back to the child who had it in the first place. But I was the one who got caught falling out with the child who'd stolen the toy. And I kind of saw that play out in my life through a number of different ways over the years. But also I had a few adults who kind of saw that little spark within me. I had a few teachers who definitely pushed me towards trying to do better. And my parents were always very supportive. They worked very hard. Sometimes I remember as a child that they weren't around that much because they were working to make sure that me and my younger brothers had opportunity. We got to go on foreign holidays with primary school, which was massive for children in our situation because those opportunities were so little, so often. And I think I was always known as the curious one, the kid who was always asking why. It got me into some great conversations. It also got me into some trouble. Wasn't always seen as that respectful of adults, but then, yeah, maybe that also is kind of plays out in the world that I do today. But I look back on my childhood with some fondness. It was a simpler time in the 80s and 90s. I definitely think in the work that I do today with young boys who are teenagers, I'm like, it would be a lot harder for someone like me to grow up now. So I've got gratitude for that space to play, that chance to be bored, that chance to mess around and not be filmed on a video camera doing silly things. And I think I was kind of gradually not always the best at applying myself, but I always had some ideas and some opinions and perspectives. And my childhood kind of, in some ways, ended when I became the first one to go to university. And then there was expectations placed upon me to transition from being that child of the family to actually being a bit of a role model and a bit of an inspiration to those around, that actually it was possible to start with relatively humble beginnings, but potentially use education as a vehicle to achieve and do better. And in the prime Thatcherite era that I grew up in, the idea of social mobility was really kind of held as a bastion of progress. And when I went to university, I was in many ways seen that way. But it's been over 20 years since I started that journey. And I think I've had a number of different reinventions, even as I've transitioned into adult life as well, which I have no doubt we'll cover in a little while.
Absolutely. That's so interesting, Lee, that you say that you were the kid who got into trouble because you were defending other people against bullies. And I mean, that hasn't finished, has it? I mean, that's that's exactly where you are now. We'll get to that in due course, but that is so telling, it seems to me. And but also that you also became the role model, because I think that's a role that is a role you still play, isn't it? So, all these kind of parts of your youth are very much, it seems to me, playing out in your adult life, even at the ripe old age of 40. So what did you study at university? What was your subject or subjects?
So I studied international business, and if I'm honest, Lucy, it was because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Uh, the beauty of international business is you get to learn some of the core aspects of business, accounting, marketing, but also stuff around comparative politics, communication styles, languages, psychology of business. So I had this wonderful mix of modules, which was good because I'm not necessarily the best person being 100% focused on just one thing. I like variety. So it was a good thing for me to study. But I did struggle moving to university, trying to be independent, trying to understand who I was. I went through a bit of a crisis. I actually fell out of university with some mental health issues and spent a year out back at home. So that pressure to be that role model, to be that example, it weighed quite heavy on my young shoulders. The truth is, when you're young and you're expected to be a role model, you also feel like you have to have it all worked out, and everyone's has expectations of you. And I was struggling with that self-awareness piece, understanding who I was, trying to be that adult, but not really feeling like that. And even just looking out into society and thinking, people who look like me and sound like me, I can't see anyone. I mean, where are the people who look and sound like me? So I went through a bit of a difficult time, and being taken back home was I mean, I felt like I failed, but over time, I felt and had an opportunity to unpack some of that, realize I hadn't failed as a person. I just struggled to navigate the environments that I was in, give myself a little bit of grace, started doing journaling, getting some of the stuff out of my head onto some paper, which 20 years ago, not really talked about that much, but incredibly helpful. And then for me, it was, what do I want to do next? I got into a better position. I kind of found personal development during that time. I really worked on myself to get into a more mature, more structured, but also just wiser place to operate from, and went back to university and graduated and kind of validated the fact that you can go for a pretty tough time, but you can come out of the other side and still achieve. And it was from there, my parents were very, very proud at that point because they'd seen me kind of hit that wall of adversity, but pick myself back up, dust myself off, make myself better, and then go back and apply myself. And I managed to get a graduate scheme at a national bank, and my parents were so proud. They took me to Burton's to buy my first work suit. It was like a momentous moment because I was going to go and get that profession that they didn't have the chance of getting because I came along and because they were not kind of pushed into those professional pathways. And obviously, again, this is 2007 when I graduate. I'm going working in finance. It was seen as, the big opportunity, big bonus, big wages, help all the family out. You'll continue to be that role model. And then the credit crunch hit and I got made redundant. And being made redundant a year into your kind of career pathway, I remember at the time when it happened feeling pretty gutted about it because I had this journey mapped out, professional qualifications, a very clear matrix of progression, and then it was just taken away with a click of a set of fingers. Uh, and I do remember feeling gutted, but also very quickly realised I'm at the start of my career. Some of the people who've been training me, They've got more letters after the name than the alphabet. They're so qualified, but they can't get jobs. Can't get jobs at the level with the skills that they've got in this really bad recession where finance jobs are just non-existent. And they've got mortgages, families, debts, holidays booked. And I've got none of that. I've got relative freedom. I've just started my career. I did have to move back home, which was tough because my parents are so downsized thinking I wasn't coming back. So I got to live in the boiler room at the back of the house, which was joyous. But the truth be told, many people, redundancy is their phoenix moment. It feels like everything that they've always known falls away. And suddenly they're in a place where they feel desperate. But so often our inspiration comes from moments of desperation. And for
Definitely.
me, that redundancy made me feel, well, you know what? You need to be grateful that you're just at the start of your career and you've not got many liabilities and you've got that flexibility. But what can you maybe do in these recessionary times to earn something that you can control? And that's obviously when I decided to start tinkering around with businesses. I was working in local government because I needed to pay my way. I needed to fund just living. And it was one of those experiments that became the very video game e-commerce business that would then, over the next 5 years, grow into an operation that was across Europe. It went from me out of that bedroom to pretty much hiring most of my family to just do stuff because it grew so quickly. And then you build a team, you build functions, and you're still in your 20s, you've not got a lot of life experience, you've got a lot of people doubting you, you even doubt yourself, you're driven by proving people wrong. That's powerful fuel, it's very negative fuel. I made lots of mistakes because I was young, I was moving quickly, I was naive at times, but I also learnt an awful lot around how to lead people, around how to grow things, and I became more adaptable. But possibly the biggest thing from that is I was then, at one point in that journey, seen as a real success. Late 20s, nice house, started a family. Everything from like a milestone perspective was, it was met. And people externally thought things were amazing. But I was actually in quite a difficult place because I was being chased by my own success. I was just waiting for it all to go wrong. And it was just incredibly stressful because I had so much responsibility over people's lives, not just my own. And the truth is, as a quite a caring person, I took that really seriously. And it made me think about some of the things again around, in the focus to grow the business, I actually started to get pulled away from my values a bit. It became all about growth and proving other people wrong, not about making a positive impact and growing personally. Yeah, I reflect back and think that was a massive period of reinvention. It really tested me, it stretched me, but it also kind of started to pull me away from who I was gradually over time in the chase to be better, to be bigger, and to do more. And that, again, I think sometimes you need to do that and have that experience to actually build back better. And that's
Definitely.
definitely what happened, obviously, 5 years into the business when my immune system failed. I suddenly lost the ability to walk. And all of a sudden, what my business was pulling in every month didn't seem to matter as much anymore.
No, gosh, that's a huge thing. So, I mean, just tracking back, Lee, I can see a reinvention that came when you kind of first fell apart at university. You went home and you kind of rebuilt yourself, and that seems to me to be a period of reinvention because then you went back to university as a different person, as someone who could actually cope with being away from home and doing what you had to do there, being the person you wanted to be, which is very young to be reinventing. But then you were kind of reinvented again as a corporate employee in banking. And then, of course, as you say, redundancy is always a huge reinvention kind of catalyst for so many people. And almost never what you choose as a reinvention. It puts you out there. So we're probably on reinvention number 3 here, 2. And then business, and that's a reinvention as an entrepreneur. And then you get ill, and that's another huge kind of change for you. So I think you've been you've been through a lot of reinventions, and they've both taken their toll, but you've also made the most of every single one of them, even though they've been difficult and painful, and you've risen from ashes already by the time we're talking, when your immune system failed. So what happened? What did you do then when that happened?
So it was 11 years ago now, Lucy, which feels like a lifetime ago in some ways and not that long ago in others. So no, I literally woke up one morning and I didn't feel right. My body started to swell up and I started to feel like the only way to describe it is I felt like I was on fire inside. It was very, very, very unpleasant, very, very quickly. And I got taken to hospital, and then they started doing all these tests, draining the fluid off my body. It was a very, very difficult time. My son was 18 months old at this point, and my daughter was actually born a few months after I was hospitalised. So it was a time when
Wow.
I was expected to be going through a bit of a family reinvention, where I was going to spend a bit more time with my newborn daughter and my little toddler of a son. And suddenly I was the one being cared for. And I suppose on reflection again, like I look back and at first I was in a pretty bad place. But both physically, obviously you are, but also a bit like, why me? Why now? It's not fair. And I need to be there for others. Everyone's there for me. I've got all these things going on. And I'm just stuck in this bed. I can't do anything. And at first you have a natural response of feeling a bit,
How
this is
long were you
rubbish.
hospitalized for?
So I was in hospital for a month, just kind of stuck in a bed, which is no
Gosh,
fun
no.
because obviously you're lying there, you've got a lot of time to reflect. You're being wheeled into the shower and having nurses washing you down and healthcare assistants helping you eat. It does make you very humble very quickly because you have to ask for help. Otherwise, nothing happens. And that was something that obviously for me, running a business, I'd had a level of control. I'd wanted to be more independent and more autonomous and more self-sufficient. And then all that was taken away. And I had no choice but to ask for help, for have others to do, meet my own caregiving needs and to delegate everything in my business to other people because I couldn't do it. And on one side, you feel like you're useless because you have no purpose. But then on the other side, you actually realize what is important, what's truly important. And I realized, my financial ratios in my business, some of the things that I valued around having all this independence and autonomy and, being able to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, it was nice. But when it's taken away, who are you? So it was a kind of a reinvention of me as a man, having those things that were valuable, like status and physical presence and being able to, you know, lead and do anything. And then you can't. So it does make you think, who am I with these things that I value being taken away? And a big part of that kind of journey was actually starting to realize that there's lots of things that I couldn't control here. Can't control not being well, can't control that, now I've been stuck in a hospital bed, I can't actually walk. I can't control these things, but what I can control is how I apply myself to my recovery. So that was the focus. And a really powerful driver within that is my daughter was born when I was in walking rehab, and I was determined to get back on my feet so I could take her first steps with her. That's what drove me through problems with my spine, problems with my knees. And I managed to get back up on my feet. By the time she was walking, I'd already beaten her to walking. And in that place of feeling like I wasn't winning at much, that was a mission I really wanted to win at. And you know what, Lucy, I did, which is
Brilliant.
comical because now she's 11 and I've not beat her much else since. But I have that victory in my back pocket. I can always have a good old laugh about that. But again, I came out of that a different person. Going on that journey with my daughter connected me to myself more deeply and made me realize just how powerful it is when our actions are driven by a desire and a vision for others rather than for ourselves. And it left me in a place again where I'd obviously gone through a year of adversity and some real challenge. And the truth is that in that time, I used lessons and tools and things I'd picked up from my mental health issues at uni, from having to navigate a corporate world that I didn't fit into, from being made redundant and picking myself up and kind of shaping a new pathway, from running a business and working with people and navigating, like difficult times financially, from supplier relationships and all that. And I just started to realize I'm gradually building a kit to navigate future challenge through the challenges I've been through. And then, after recovery, there was an expectation that I would go back into the business. We had plans to expand in North America, and they wanted me to come and, come back on, beat the drum and lead on that, be the face, be the voice, be the one who was pushing and relentlessly looking for that. And I just decided, Lucy, that I didn't want to. I didn't feel like it was what I wanted, because if anything, a year's recovery, both physically and mentally, changes who you are, and you don't walk the same way once you've lost it and learnt to walk again. And I just decided I was going to step out of my business operationally to become a stay-at-home dad to my kids, knowing that I wouldn't get that time otherwise, I wouldn't have that bond. And I'll be brutally honest, I went into it thinking, I've led a big team of adults, 2 toddlers, I'll be absolutely fine. Very quickly realised how I underestimated that. I underestimated the
Yeah,
mental
that's
load.
that.
I underestimated the mental load of getting them out of the house in the morning. I didn't realise how many skills I've built doing it. Like, it's still to this day, say it was the most effective leadership and development training course I've ever been on. And it was really, really powerful because I'm one of 3 brothers. Obviously worked in finance and tech for most of my career, involved in sports and other things. A very, very male-dominant life. And I went into my local baby and toddler group for a bit of a rest because, I'll be honest, I was knackered. And I walked in and I was the only father in the room, and I felt pretty uncomfortable. But I thought, you know what? Just embrace it. You've embraced a lot already. Just go and sit down, listen to mothers and grandmothers, have a brew. It'll be all right. And it was fascinating to just sit there and listen to the stories of all those mothers and grandmothers, the things they've been through, a realization that every single one of them had a story. And that kind of ignited that social justice part of me that had been a little bit dormant in the years around building the business and recovering. And I just thought, it's not fair. I want to do something about this. Who do I go and steal the toy off here and give it back to these women?
Another amazing reinvention from being, a sort of successful entrepreneur to being, well, several reinventions to being a very sick person with no ability to control your life at all, to then taking a completely different route and being what the non-typical, non-stereotypical male breadwinner and being the stay-at-home dad looking after toddlers and realizing, as of course any woman will say to you, any mother will say to you, that's much harder than the work piece. I think a lot of women go to work for respite from small children often.
Yeah, no, it's true, isn't it? And I think for me, Lucy, it was really beneficial in so many ways. It expanded my perspective on the world, helped me see things I'd not considered. It actually played a role in the very work that I do today,
Yeah,
8, 9 years later. But at times it was quite lonely.
yeah,
Like, I
of
went from
course.
having founder networks talking about investment and building teams and talent and trying to make payroll and with groups of people who were going through similar things. And then actually found up in the north, I didn't have a group of men to just sit with and talk about changing nappies and what's a good day out for 2 toddlers under 3. And are they supposed to have those spots there? I didn't have that group of men. So sometimes, despite the mothers and grandmothers being great, I didn't have a group who I had the same affinity with necessarily. So actually, at
No.
times, it was a bit lonely.
Yeah, you suddenly found yourself the odd one out when you'd, been very much kind of part of similar populated groups before. And that must have been, that must have been very tough, but also a fantastic learning process, because I can see that every time you are put in a position where you need to reinvent yourself, you really work at that reinvention and learning the lessons, which is such a great attribute to have. So how long were you at home for, and when did you kind of decide to come out of that and turn it into something else?
Yeah, so I had the joys of 2.5 years, Lucy, which is amazing because so few men even take more than 2 weeks. Financially, I was able to. That's a massive privilege. in the structures around me meant that I could. And it was a very, very powerful experience. I also did my master's part-time at the same time in the evenings when they were in bed. So I was using that time as well to upskill myself academically to be able to do the work that I do today. And with the lived experience plus the academic stuff, it wasn't until 2019, so 6 years ago now, both my children were in school, and I thought, well, I need to start thinking about what I'm going to do next. And that's when I decided to set up the wellbeing consultancy and think about how I could tackle some of the gender health gap stuff that I'd seen. I was passionate about health given my own journey and just spending all that time with mothers and thinking about aspects around my masters. I wanted to think about how we can close health gaps in the workplace and how health impacts how people behave and support each other and work as teams. And that again was moving into a very different space, going from the tech industry with products into, in many ways, the business consultancy and training industry with a service. So I had to, in many ways, put myself back as a beginner, not fall into the, oh, well, I've run a business before, so I know what I'm doing mindset that I've seen other entrepreneurs fall into, because you can't take things for granted. The landscape was very different. The audience was massively different, and I'd gone from a product to a service. So it was literally like starting again. I tried to embrace that curious approach and pretend like I'd not run a business before, because I felt that would be really helpful. I came up with this wonderful idea for interactive delivery of gap closing sessions, behaviour change, all this wonderful in-person team building stuff. And then we launched in February 2020.
Great timing.
And if we're going to talk about reinvention, nothing makes you reinvent your business like stepping straight into a global pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did you do? What happened?
So, firstly, we had to digitize the parts that we could. But what we actually realized is possibly the best way to start the business was to actually support on the community response, because there was going to be gender health gaps based on the pandemic. So we provided a lot of support during the pandemic for NHS frontline workers. And by actually stepping into supporting the people who were supporting others, it actually helped us build credibility as a business. It was also a chance for us to, again, find a way to give back to those who are giving back to others. And that kind of started to meet that feeling of me that I need to be socially making some positive change for people. And then I feel happier about some of the more commercial things that I do. And I still reflect back to thinking about that time when I was struggling at university. And one of the things about reinvention is that back then I felt like I had to have it all worked out. I needed to know who I was going to be as an adult. I needed to know what job I was going to have. I needed to know what I was going to be like. And the truth is, because I couldn't see it, I struggled. But when that happened, I actually realised that I'm probably never going to have it all worked out. And that's okay. And funnily enough, that has helped. That little mantra has stuck with me all this last 20 years since that happened. Of actually, you don't have to have it all worked out, and you're a constant work in progress. And that, again, when the pandemic hit, it just allowed me to think, okay, most of this stuff we plan to do, it's just not going to happen. Two of our initial clients said, look, our intentions and our focus is completely elsewhere, so we can't do anything right now. And I think some people at that point will put their head in the hands and be like, oh, geez, this is terrible. And I was just like, okay, what can we do then? So that was really powerful, because that first year was navigating that pandemic landscape. But we were thinking, and how can we support people who are now working from home, who are disconnected from the teams, who are navigating, a time when they've got family members who are ill and people they can't see. And we just thought, how do we create a response based on the situation? Because everyone's going through something at the minute. And that in many ways created the foundations to build upon that. And obviously the work that we do today, a lot of it is around thinking about men's engagement in inclusion and well-being, how they can work to close some of these gender gaps. And how can they make a difference to other people by building that skill set? And that has come through that realization that men weren't coming and seeking support of those services. When it came to designing, there were less men in the room. And I just started to think, okay, so part of reinvention is looking further up the stream at why people are falling in it, instead of your solutions just pulling people out. I wanted to know what's wrong with the bridges and the pathways and the riverbanks. Why are there so many people in this river? So as I've just wandered up this is kind of taking me into this work because we've got all these gender gaps and people keep falling in the gaps. And now my work is about how do we come together to actually build some bridges so we don't fall into those gender gaps. The gaps are smaller, we support each other, we've realised everyone's going through something. And actually, part of my work is helping people to see that they don't have to just believe what they've always believed. They don't always have to be the person they thought they were told to be. And actually, part of my work is helping men to reinvent themselves by exploring who they actually are, not who they've been told to be, and give them that permission to actually start to go out there and express who they are and explore who they are. But for all that, Lucy, ultimately, reinventions are just pivotal. Nowadays, business call it a pivot. Got a really nice name during the pandemic. And even you in the world of publishing, you can't just do things in the traditional way. It's all about thinking what new technologies are at play, and whether it's personal journeys, business journeys, career journeys, relationships, friendships, hobbies, everything evolves at some point. As humans, we evolve, we reinvent ourselves, we go again. So I think it's just natural to let some things die and to realise that sometimes we will quit. There have been things in the past 20 years that I've started, I've built, and then I thought, actually, there's nothing wrong in quitting if you've tried and you've looked at it objectively and realised it's probably not worth the amount of effort it's going to take. I've got a few different things over the years that have been built, that have been piloted, and they've not gone any further than that. And that's a choice, because reinvention is actually about experimentation. But that's the beauty of it, because reinvention isn't permanent.
That's absolutely brilliantly. I was going to ask you at the end what advice you have for anybody who feels the need to reinvent or change, but you've actually just given the most perfect advice and examples there. So just quickly to finish off, just tell us what Male Allies UK is doing and what you're doing with the reinvention of the gender roles, the gender stereotypes, and men and women.
Yeah, so we help a lot of organisations to understand what gender gaps they've got. We do a lot around supporting men step into inclusion. What does the skill set of allyship look like? So it's building the skills of working across difference, working more collectively. And then we do research with boys in schools, understand what their lives are like, what support they might need, what challenges they're facing. We did a whole report launched in Parliament last month. That's available through our website for you to read and see what are over 1,000 boys in the UK today saying about technology, relationships, education, careers. And next year we're hosting the UK's first National Allyship Summit. The themes from gender division to gender dialogue. How do we get together and actually close some of these gaps together? And we do work with really, a whole range of corporate clients, some global, some regional, across 12 different sectors. But it's fascinating work. It's getting men in the room, getting men to understand the role that they can play, and fundamentally making sure that inclusion includes everyone. It's fascinating work. Where will I be in 5 years' time? People sometimes ask. The answer is, I don't know. But probably there'll be some level of reinvention. But what I will say, I'm very, very passionate about the work that I'm doing at the minute. And I think that 20 years of testing, of experimenting, of pilots, of pivots, have actually now taken me to do work where I really, really enjoy it. And I get up in the morning and I love what I do. I love the people I do it with, and I love the impact I can make. So with that, I think through every twist, turn, adversity, pitfall, you just take a little lesson and learning from it, and at some point you will shape something that's purposeful, that's meaningful, and actually realise that every time you come back and rebirth yourself again, your wings get a little bit hotter and a bit wider and a bit more vibrant.
That is the most brilliant summary of reinvention, of your reinventions and it's just amazing to hear from you how you've used reinvention, how you've embraced reinvention to make it the most creative thing that you could possibly have in your life. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, and may you go on in your next 5-10 years to reinvent even bigger and better things. What you're doing now is fantastic and much appreciated. Lee, thank you so much for sharing your very inspiring story of life reinventions. As I said, although there has been a through line from the boy who got into trouble for defending other kids who were being bullied to the founder of Male Allies UK, where, of course, you defend so many underrepresented groups and communities, you've both chosen and had reinvention thrust upon you on the journey. And the advice you gave anyone who finds themselves in what seems like an impossible situation, from redundancy to ill health, mental or physical, is so inspiring. Look at where you are and how you got here, learn the lessons and grow into your next reinvention. If you enjoyed the Phoenix Conversations, please like the episode and subscribe to the podcast wherever you access it, on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or maybe all three. And do join me on LinkedIn, Instagram, or any social media. I am the only Lucy Macara. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.